Welcome to our podcast. This is Friends on Fire.
I'm Mike. I'm a lifelong devotee of financial independence. I even wrote a book about it.
And I'm Maggie, a newer convert, but just as passionate, especially on the intersection of minimalism and financial independence.
We're one and the same.
We are two like-minded friends who believe that talking about money with your friends and family opens the door to financial well-being.
The Friends on Fire podcast is about dispelling myths, building financial acumen, and sharing your financial independence journey with the people you care about.
This is Friends on Fire.
Hey, Mike.
Hey, Maggie.
Hey, Landshark.
Hey, Maggie. Hey, Mike. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, we're excited to have you here. This is the first time I've said hi to like an animal. I don't even know if I should call Landshark an animal, really.
I'm a land-based fish.
Land-based fish. We'll get into that. We'll get into a little bit more about what exactly a landshark is. But we really appreciate you coming on this podcast.
So, Landshark, I'm very excited to talk to you because Maggie has mentioned you a bunch of times to me because she has heard you on another podcast, and she has referenced a few times now that everything you said is like what she thinks, although you articulate it much better than she does. Which I think,
by the way, the bar's set low for articulating things better than I do.
Right.
So, but that's still a compliment for what it's worth.
It's a slight compliment.
yeah.
It's a compliment.
I'm taking it as a compliment.
I will just say if we get a lot of flack for how much context I give. It takes me, brevity is not my strength. I'll put it that way.
Something to work on in early retirement, I guess,
It
right?
is.
Yeah,
that's
right.
one of many reasons I'm retiring is to be able to focus on my brevity.
Work on your brevity. I like
Yeah,
it.
exactly. I'm going to give a quick introduction of you so everyone knows a little bit just about who you are and where you come from. So Landshark lives in Denver, Colorado with his wife and two elementary aged kids. In his day job, he is a practicing lawyer for almost 2 decades or close to 2 decades. They have been saving and investing aggressively for years. And we'll hear a little bit more about exactly how and why you've or how and when you've pulled the trigger. But you are in the process of retiring. And we're excited to hear more about that. And he writes on his blog, Landshark, and I think you have a really like informative and entertaining spin on how you write things. Like I was reading your article about your in-laws the other day, and it was just I just love that the title was in-laws also. It really pulled me in to want to read, like want to know more.
Everyone wants to know about other people's in-laws, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yours sound lovely, by the way, though, just to be
They
clear.
are really nice. I'm really lucky in that regard.
So, Landshark, you use the name on your blog to protect your anonymity, which is very common in the personal finance space because these topics are so personal, and we respect that and appreciate it. You have the most unique
anonymous
name I have come across in this space, and I'm dying to know, how did you come to it?
So I wish there was a really good story. I mean, the famous Landshark skit from the 70s, the Saturday Night Live skit with Dan Aykroyd and the Landshark is kind of the genesis of it. When I started the Landshark Twitter account, and I guess I was looking at all the different Twitter accounts and blogs, and there were a lot of personal finance this and money this and they're just kind of like nondescript personal finance type accounts. Fire this, and I wanted to do something that was going to be a little different, that was going to stand out, to try to kind of reflect on the fact that it was whimsical and not taking myself too seriously. I know when I was asked on a previous podcast about the genesis of the Landshark name, it became clear to me that the person who was asking me was a millennial and was young enough that they didn't know about the Saturday Night Live skit, so they just thought that it was something that I invented, and I did not. I took it from Saturday Night Live. But, I came up with a story that, lawyers are sharks. And so therefore, somehow that was the right type of appropriation for me.
So we like to ask everyone this question, aside from why they came up with the name Landshark. Our second question for everybody is we like to just understand a little bit about your childhood. Like, how were you raised? And specifically like financially, and how do you think that impacted your views on money as you grew up?
So I'm the child of immigrants, and we kind of grew up in a decent suburb, but we didn't really have a lot of money where I grew up, and I paid my way through college and law school on my own. My parents and my grandparents instilled in me the idea of the importance of saving money and, being smart with your money. But, I wish I came from a place of abundance in terms of, what my parents had. And, but what I got was an abundance of love, an abundance of mentorship. And I think they taught me right. And they taught me to be smart with money and to not waste it.
It's interesting that you say you wish you came from a place of abundance. I actually think some of not that you can't also learn these lessons when coming from a place of abundance. I think some of the best financial lessons kids learn are actually when there are some level of restrictions and scarcity around them, because you learn to be more thoughtful and intentional with the resources you do have and to appreciate certain things.
Yeah.
You can't also have that.
Yeah, probably so. I mean, I don't wish anything different about my childhood. It was a great childhood. I didn't want for anything, but I didn't get a brand new car when I turned 17 and I got my driver's license. I had bought my own beater that lasted until it died, and then bought the next beater and rinse and repeat.
So did I. And that's my point, is I think it builds character. So I think every 16-year-old kid should be, or 17, however old you are, should be driving something safe, but pretty sketchy, driving into their school parking lot.
I agree with that.
So did your attitude and philosophy about money change as you grew up? And was there ever a point in your life where you made a pretty dramatic change in how you viewed money? Or would you say that your attitudes were pretty consistent over your life?
I think I was always, decently smart with money. I didn't waste it necessarily, but when I got married, my wife is more frugal than I am. And I think that she, when I saw the way she was with money, that kind of got me, more focused on saving for retirement and doing the things that, you kind of do, going down the fire path. I was more of a spender. She was a little more frugal. And I think that was probably because once I had a job and I was actually making decent money, it was fun to, buy a toy here and there. But I never got to the point where I was spending, with reckless abandon and buying, fancy cars and fancy clothes or anything like that. But, I like a toy here and there.
Can you give us an example of one of these toys?
So I am a musician, so there is no limit of toys that musicians can acquire. So you can see the guitar behind me. So there's just, you go to a Guitar Center or, any sort of music store, you can find something to spend money on.
Yeah. And so let's fast forward to your very recent retirement. Can you take us through this timeline of events and maybe tell us when you first had this goal and then how you got to where you are today?
So I've been practicing law for about almost 2 decades now. And, if I'm being honest with myself, I probably knew about 2 weeks into the practice of law that I made a mistake. I was working at a big law firm in New York City and working for just the world's biggest asshole. And I knew right then and there that, I think I may have made a mistake here. So, at that point in time, I wasn't necessarily thinking about making a transition because, I was getting paid well and I had some law school debt that I needed to pay off. But I knew that I wasn't going to be one of those lawyers that was going to practice well into my 70s and 80s, be one of those gray hairs that is just always at the office and dying at the office. So I kind of viewed the law as a means to an end and, used it to, jumpstart our retirement savings and really jumpstart the whole process of early retirement. So long story short, I practiced for 15, 20 years, got to the point where I think I got comfortable that we had enough. And then I mathed it out with enough spreadsheets to really feel comfortable that we could really screw up pretty bigly in terms of what our assumptions are, and we'd still be okay, right? We mathed it out with a 20% correction or the 50% correction, and with this scenario and that scenario, and got to the point where I felt like that the money really wasn't the problem. It was more a question of what we were going to do with the rest of our lives. But in terms of where what kind of was the genesis for this whole decision. For me, it was really when my kids were born, and those kind of long nights where you're nursing a baby in the middle of the night and you're thinking to yourself like, oh my God, I got to go to work in 2 hours and it's 4 o'clock in the morning and I don't want to be up right now. And I was just kind of thinking about how quick life passes us by and how precious, childhood is and how I didn't want to miss my kids' childhood. So I started kind of doing some reading and, came across a bunch of blogs and, various kind of discussion forums that were, more popular probably about like 10, 15 years ago, and started making a plan to execute on something that we're now executing on, which is, early retirement. Then I kind of set that plan in motion once COVID hit and I was working from home and realized like, wow, I can actually walk my kids to school each and every day and pick them up from school. And this is really great. I don't have a commute and I don't want to give any of that up. And once, my wife and I kind of looked at what the numbers were like, she got on board with the idea of, well, you don't necessarily need to work anymore and you could just stay at home and be more present in the kids' lives and walk them to school each and every day and not be practicing law anymore. So kind of a rambling answer to your question, but it's it's not an easy question to answer.
No, it's a really interesting story. So a couple questions just kind of through your timeline. So do you remember the very first time you even learned about the term early retirement? Like what you were reading and what even gave you the idea that that was a path? Yeah,
so I was reading the Bogleheads Forum.
Yeah.
So I don't know if you know the Bogleheads Forum, but they're the disciples of Jack Bogle, and there's a great book which is the Bogleheads Guide to Investing, and I think somebody actually gave me that book, and so I was reading that book, and I think from there I found the Bogleheads Forum, and within the forum, this was right along the time when Mr. Money Mustache started out, and people started talking about fire. So it was like 2012, 2013. Mm-hmm. And I started looking at, various posts and I was just like, what is this fire thing that people are talking about? Like at that point in time, I had no idea what fire was. And I really wasn't thinking that, fire was something that, was for me, necessarily, because I guess at that point in time, I still had law school debt and I still had, I wasn't in any position where I thought that, early retirement was going to be a possibility. But it was enough for me to start learning about it and get interested in it. And then over time, I think as the market compounded, we started to realize that, well, actually, if you just start being really smart with your finances and, pay off your debt and save aggressively and invest, it can be an option.
Yeah, that's awesome. And so then you talked about when COVID hit, you started to see just the lifestyle improvements and being able to be more present with your kids and everything. So prior to COVID, did you not have plans to like retire in the next couple of years?
Yeah. I mean, I don't know if I ever necessarily like had an idea of like what enough was. And I think that was kind of like the gating factor against executing on any sort of like plan for early retirement. Like I knew in my heart that I didn't want to practice law for the rest of my life. And there were so many other things that I wanted to do with my time that, I couldn't do while I was practicing law, right? Because it was just too all encompassing and all consuming. But I think the thing that I struggled with was kind of figuring out, well, how much do I actually need to actually get to the point where I've determined that I have enough, that I don't need to work, and I can still maintain the lifestyle that I want to maintain. And once I finally figured out kind of what that number was, then everything started to kind of fall in line, where I realized like, okay, if I had this amount of money, then I can have this amount of runway until we get to traditional retirement age. And then, the retirement accounts will take over. And once we got to that point, then everything kind of flowed from that.
So during this time, how happy or unhappy were you with your work? And how much of it was wanting to be with your kids and how much of it was, I'm getting pretty tired of being a lawyer?
So I love trial. So I'm a trial lawyer, and trial is a lot of fun. And it's a performance. You're basically on a stage, you're acting in front of a jury, you're putting on a case. And that aspect of the practice of law is really unlike anything that I can say I've ever done in the past. Like, I don't know if either of you guys have ever like acted in a school play or something like that, but and it's a performance, right? Like you're
but I have.
You're putting on a show, and it's exciting. And when you win, like, and you put all your cards on the table, and somebody wins, somebody loses, and it's really rewarding when you can do a good job for your client. But unfortunately, like the practice of law is such that like trial is the exception. It's not the norm, and it's just too expensive and too uncertain for people to go to trial. So most cases settle. And 95% of the practice of law is kind of the grind leading up to trial, and only 5% of it is the actual trial. So, if I was actually just practicing law where I was taking cases to trial all the time and didn't have to deal with all the other stuff, yeah, maybe I'd continue working in that capacity. But the actual grind of the practice of law, I think ultimately there's something like systemically wrong with and structurally wrong with the practice of law that is kind of incompatible with my personality. And that is that as a lawyer, we sell our time to our clients, and our clients pay us for our time. So we bill hourly, and ultimately I bill my time and my clients pay me for my time. And so essentially they own my time. They own my time, and you're always on call, and you need to treat that time, I guess, with the appropriate amount of respect that your clients are paying, hundreds of dollars an hour for it. But as a result, I just didn't have enough time left over to do all the things that I wanted to do with my time. And, now I'm no longer willing to put a price on my time. And I truly believe that time is our most valuable asset, and I'm not willing to waste it. And I'm just not willing to trade it for any more money because we have enough.
Yeah. I love that. Yeah. Very well said. And just to go back 2 seconds on a very important point, when you were talking about if any of us can relate to being in trial, I can't really, but I am on the last episode of Inventing Anna. Have you watched it?
I have not.
Okay.
I love this show.
Mike, I wouldn't have thought you'd watched it.
I'm so into it.
The only reason I even mention it, Landshark, is...
Wait, don't spoil it.
I'm not going to spoil anything, but there's a trial at the end. You can pretty much figure that out.
Is it a lawyer show? I've never even heard of it.
No, it's about like a con woman. I'll just leave it at that. It's about a con woman. Well, potentially, if she, depending on how things, net out at trial. But it's in the final scenes when they are at trial, like it is like electrifying watching him perform, her lawyer. And it's a drama. I mean, it's not like a reality show. It's a drama, but based on a true story. And it's just, I can see what you mean by the performance, and just probably how, I don't know, invigorating it is, or whatever the right word is.
Well, since we are talking about Inventing Anna, most of the episodes are about that lawyer in the daily grind of going through discovery and like 1,000 boxes of stuff. So, Landshark, we totally get it.
That's what we're trying to say.
I was actually going to make that point, Mike. The entire season is the build up to some trial in the final episode. So yes, it's exactly what you're saying. Like, not enough trial, too much of all the other stuff.
Yeah. And I don't mean to be the type of person that, begrudges my career or anything like that. Like, it's been very good to me. I was very fortunate. I made a very good living. I was able to provide for my family, and, now I'm able to early retire. And it's all because of the fact that, I went to law school and earned a very good living as a practicing lawyer. It's just that, there is a sunset on that career for me, and it just wasn't something that I wanted to do for the rest of my time. So, I feel that there are some of my partners. I'm actually talking to some of my now former partners who are reaching out, and we're actually talking about the fire movement. It's kind of interesting how some of these things were not said when we were all working together, but now that I've made the announcement, maybe you're seeing something similar, Maggie, with your news. Once you kind of like open up that door, people start kind of walking through it and talking to you about it.
Yeah,
but,
totally.
Some of the people that I'm talking to like absolutely love their job, and they can't imagine doing anything else with their time. So they're going to be those gray hairs that are going to work until they're 70 or 80 years old. And God bless them. I mean, more power to them. I hope that they are totally happy and fulfilled. Just for me, there's a lot of life to live, and not enough time to do it when I'm working. So I'm going to take a different path.
Yeah, like I said, you articulate things better than I could. I 100% agree with everything you just said. And you can love your job and be good at it. And it doesn't mean that it's not burning you out and that you're not tired and exhausted and that you have other things that you would like to do in life if you had the financial freedom to do them. So on that note, I would love to hear a little bit more about two things. One, just you have given your notice, or I mean, it's a little bit different because you're a partner in a law firm. And I think you're still, finishing out some trials. So talk a little bit about kind of that exit process. And then also like, what are you going to do on the flip side? Like, what are some of your plans and dreams? And, how do you see, the next, couple decades looking, or just couple years, if that's easier.
Yeah. So I was a partner in a law firm. I worked with my partners for a number of years and had a really great relationship with them. Like I worked with a lot of really, really good people. So I was very fortunate in that regard. What I did was, I gave my notice at the tail end of last year, and, the practice of law, at least as a trial lawyer, you've got, various cases that are set for trial, and some things are in your control, some things are outside of your control. And I didn't want to leave any of my existing clients that I had good relationships with, high and dry. And I didn't want to just say, hey, I'm retiring, go find another lawyer. So I didn't want to abandon them. So what I am essentially doing is I'm transitioning from, an equity partner in a law firm to more of a contract position where I'm just going to get paid based on the work that I'm doing. So I'm just basically trying to finish out a couple of those cases, which hopefully will get finished by the fall of this year. And then I'll be totally done with the practice of law. But I'm keeping my law license intact. I'm going to continue that contractual relationship with the firm. And that's going to also enable me to send any of the clients that I have that are going to call me periodically and say, hey, I've got a problem that I need help with. And I can answer those calls and send them to my former colleagues and just say, they can help you. So that'll be great. In terms of, what I'm transitioning to, so I was really looking forward to decompressing and really just taking some time off to spend with my family, focusing on health and wellness, kind of getting rid of the stress in my life that was omnipresent from the practice of law. And, just really focus on health and wellness and time with the kids and my wife. Unfortunately, at the very tail end of last year, the community where we live suffered a catastrophic wildfire, which has kind of thrown everything in a state of disarray. So I've been actually spending a good chunk of my time not working for the practice of law and in the practice of law, but actually doing a lot of community service, helping people kind of navigate the process of cleaning up the debris and rebuilding and navigating insurance carriers and things like that. So there was over 1,000 homes that were lost over the course of just 6 hours.
So you're helping some of your neighbors on all that.
Yeah. So I'm helping neighbors and just people in the community right now, which is actually a nice benefit of transitioning from the practice of law right now, because, I have more time than I've ever had before, while I was working full time, that I actually can, work on behalf of, my community to try to help it rebuild. The transition has been a little different than I was, anticipating, but I think that's one of the things that we all need to be mindful of when we're considering, our fire plans, because, everybody can set up a spreadsheet and say, okay, if once I save, $1 million, I'm going to live on $40,000 a year under the 4% rule, and I'm going to be fine for X number of years. But then we have, then Russia invades Ukraine, right? Yeah. And then we've got, market turbulence, and we've got inflation, or we've got a catastrophic wildfire. There's all these sorts of things that can pose as, bumps in the road that we don't anticipate. But, hopefully if we plan enough, we'll be able to kind of weather those storms. I mean, right now, like we're down 10% in the S&P 500 for the year. Our portfolio is down 4%. And I still feel really good about what the math is looking like. But, once we kind of clear these immediate bumps in our community, what I'm really looking forward to prioritizing is really kind of like 4 buckets of, what I want to focus on in my life. And those are really exercise, creation, learning, and family time. So, I want to spend as much time as possible being outdoors, exercising. I love to ski, hike, bike, doing all the things that, the Colorado lifestyle affords just in our back door. I want to focus on writing, through the Landshark blog, making music, cooking new meals for my family. I love to cook. I want to focus on learning, reading. I've always wanted to learn how to play the piano, so I'm going to be, working on that. And then, ultimately, my kids are in elementary school. They're growing really quickly, and I want to spend a lot of time with them, playing outdoors, playing games, just being present in their life as they are children before they turn into teenagers and don't want to spend any time with me anymore.
That sounds like an incredible plan.
I love it. I love that you have it organized into 4 buckets also.
So if we can go back to the wildfire that you mentioned briefly, I think this sounds like a very profound life experience, both a life and death experience, but then also the opportunity you are having now to help your community out. What has that taught you? How is this? I would imagine this has had a pretty big impact on your life.
Yeah. I mean, I never thought I was going to die before. I was never in a life and death situation where our lives flashed in front of our eyes. I never was in a car accident where something like that happened. I never really got close to a situation where things had to get put in perspective. But the Marhsall fire made national news on December 30th, 2021. And, what happened was, so we live just outside of Boulder, Colorado, and this fire. So we're not necessarily in a wildfire zone. Maybe all of Colorado is now a wildfire zone, but we're not in a forested area. We're in a suburb of Boulder and Denver, Colorado, and this fire started at about 10:30 in the morning, and they're still trying to investigate what the cause was. But that day, the winds were blowing 115 miles an hour. It was crazy. It was absolutely crazy. And what happened was it hadn't rained in about 6 months. So the drought that we were dealing with here in Colorado was severe. And when you take a fire, fuel it with 115 mile an hour winds and totally bone dry conditions, it spreads really quickly. So over the course of about 6 hours, 1,000 homes were gone. And usually you hear about these wildfires and they take, weeks, months to kind of work through these kind of wilderness areas, or several days at least. A lot of the fires out, like the Paradise Fire out in California and some of the fires out in Oregon, they took several days, several weeks to kind of ravage these communities. We had absolutely no notice whatsoever. It was 11 o'clock. We had dropped our car off to get new tires at the local Costco. We left the Whole Foods that's right next door. And as we were leaving it, we smelled some campfire. And I said to Mrs. Landshark, I was like, "Do you smell that?" And she's like, "Yeah." It's like, that's not something that you want to be smelling on December 30th, like a campfire on a windy day. So she went to the gym after that. We were kind of waiting for Costco to call us back about our car. And at 12:54 p.m., we got the reverse 911 call that said the entire community was evacuating. And at that point in time, I was home with my kids. My wife was at the gym. I called my wife. I said, "You need to get home." She got home, and I, in the meantime, packed a bag with, a couple, precious belongings. I grabbed our wedding album, some family albums. I didn't grab any of the important documents. I didn't grab passports, didn't grab birth certificates, didn't grab the deed to the house, didn't grab any of that stuff. I told the kids, "All right, grab, we were leaving, grab what you need to grab." They grabbed a couple stuffed animals and some electronics, and we were in the car and we were gone. And as we were leaving, we headed north, and the fire was to our west. It was like day became night instantly. And we were just surrounded in a plume of black smoke. And the only thing that we could see was just red hot embers just flying around us. And then the flames started coming up over the west, which jumped the highway. And, at that point, Mrs. Landshark was just like, "We got to get out of here." And I just did a 180 in the middle of the road. Didn't know if anybody was coming in the opposite direction, but we knew that we couldn't go where we were going. And, we ended up evacuating then out kind of to the southeast and drove down towards Denver, and then headed way east to get clear of the smoke. So it was really, really fast moving. And, we watched the fire over the course of the next several hours at a friend's house, where we were sheltering for the next couple of days, it turned out. And, what we were seeing on the news was just absolutely terrifying. And, it's one of those things where you hear about these people who live in areas that are, subject to severe weather, like hurricane zones or tornado alley, or areas where, like Katrina flooded New Orleans, and people are kind of used to these type of severe weather events. So they have go bags and they're used to evacuating. Well, we're in a suburb of Denver and Boulder. Like, we don't evacuate here. Like, maybe we get some snow, maybe we get some hail here and there, but we don't have to evacuate. So we ended up evacuating, and, we weren't ready for it. But when we got the reverse 911 call, we followed it, and I'm really glad that we did when we did. But it was terrifying. So, I mean, that was like when we were surrounded by the smoke and it was pitch black. That was really the first time in my life that I was like, okay, like, this is not good. We might not make it. And because it was that terrifying. Fortunately, we were able to get out of it fast enough. And it wasn't anything like the images that you see of people in like Paradise, California, where, they're traveling down those mountain passes and there's just one road, and, the forest is on fire on both sides of the road, and you're going for miles. Fortunately, we were in an area where, because the fire was so fast moving, it wasn't as, widespread of a, geographic area. But what it ended up doing was just leveling entire subdivisions within our community. And you go by it now and it looks like somebody just dropped a nuclear bomb on it. It's absolutely terrifying. And just heartbreaking.
That is very just scary. Even hearing you like tell the story just is making me emotional. But so your house, in the end, you came back and your house was untouched, or?
Yeah, I mean, we had some smoke damage, but it didn't burn.
Okay, you didn't lose.
No, the house is still standing. I'm in it right now, and we're very lucky. I
mean, I'm glad you guys were obviously okay in your house and everything. It sounds like a lot of people weren't, and that was right before New Year's Eve too. So a lot of people traveling and not even home.
I mean, yeah, there was definitely people that were out of town, but there were still also a lot of people that were home. And one of the things that is becoming like abundantly clear as the weeks and months go by, and this is my unsolicited personal finance advice for the two of you and for all the listeners, there's going to be a tremendous underinsurance problem for all the people in our community. So what I would recommend you do is you contact your insurance agent and you find out exactly what you would get paid if your house burned to the ground, and then what it would cost to rebuild your house.
Yeah.
And you're going to find out, with inflation right now and just the housing market all across the country, that people cannot rebuild for what their insurance policies are going to pay. And so what we've done is we've increased our coverage by 150%. So, the replacement value of our house, and that still might not necessarily be enough. Yeah. But there are so many people out there that are going to be, forced to probably sell their properties because they're not going to be able to, afford to rebuild.
Yeah, it's a really great point. I've actually done mine myself recently for a number of reasons. My brother's house burned down many, many years ago. And he went through I've just watched him go through that for, years, having to move out and have it rebuilt. And it recently, in the past, I say recently, but in the past 5 years, happened to a few houses in our neighborhood. And that was their advice to everyone. They basically realized how, and this was, pre a lot of more recent inflation. But they just realized how, the average person is not truly insured for a full house replacement.
Yeah. And how would you know, right? I don't know what it costs to rebuild a house. I've never built a house before. Right. And I hope that's not something that I've ever been interested in. And I hope to never have to go through something like that. And I've just trusted my insurance agent that, I'm adequately covered. And I say, hey, are we covered if it burns down? Yeah, you're covered. This is what it's going to cost. And okay, well, that seems less than what we paid for the house. Well, part of it is the value of the ground, right? And it's like, okay, well that makes sense. And then you go on your way, and then when you actually have a claim, you find out that you're not going to be able to actually recover.
What about that experience? I mean, aside from the obvious thing you talked about just being scared for your life and everything else, what did you take away from that kind of reaffirmed or was aligned to this path you were already on, just around what's important to you and what matters?
Well, life is short and we're not going to live forever. And it's just so important that, we live mindfully, right? And, live by our values. I think one of the things that I struggled with, and it was kind of interesting that, I gave my notice before we went through this wildfire process. And my wife asked me, do you think you would have given your notice if this happened in reverse, right? Like if the fire happened first and then we, we'd be and you'd be giving your notice. And I was just like, well, I don't know if I want to necessarily like play that hypothetical right now because it doesn't matter because I've already given my notice. And, when I was struggling with the process of actually giving my notice, one of the things that I struggled with was, what are people going to think? What are they going to say? Are they going to judge? And I wanted to make sure that I was, doing things the right way because I felt like I owed it to my colleagues. I owed it to my clients. And I think I worried and cared a little bit too much about what others were going to think about my plans. But at the end of the day, like what I'm finding now is that, we're not as important as we'd like to think we are. And certainly to our employers, we're all replaceable, notwithstanding the fact that we all think that we're not, we're all replaceable. And, you don't need to ask yourself for permission to live the life that you want to live. Like you just need to do it. But a lot of people don't because it's just easier to stay in the situation that you're currently in. And that's, not necessarily just applicable to your career. It could be your personal relationships and, you stay in a relationship with somebody because, you don't want to hurt them, even though you know that you need to get out of it. Right. And it's always easy to be complacent and to just, stay with the status quo, but making a change is hard. But, tomorrow's not guaranteed. And, so what I've kind of taken from this whole thing is just that life is absolutely precious. And the time that we have with our friends and family, that's the thing that is the most important by far. And, if you waste away your life working for somebody else and doing things that don't make you happy, you're going to end up regretting, the time that you didn't spend prioritizing the things that you actually value. So I just hope that, if there's, anything that I've learned through this process and that others can kind of take from it is to really think about the things that you value in life and prioritize those values because, if you do, you won't regret that. But if you don't, you will.
Very well said.
I mean, I'm telling you, I'm going to keep saying this, but you are just articulating thoughts that I am slowly realizing over time very well.
Landshark, would you like to replace Maggie and be my co-host on this podcast?
That's not what I meant, Mike.
Oh, sorry.
I'll be a guest whenever you want.
Thank you. So speaking of life and death, big question that comes up in the fire community a lot, and Maggie's getting this all the time now.
Yeah, I get it daily lately. Since
medical benefits or medical insurance.
What's your plan?
What are you guys handling it?
So right now, we actually just went through this process. So I am benefiting from having Wi-Fi, and my wife, Mrs. Landshark, is going to continue to work for probably a year or two. So we're not.
Did you
retiring.
say Wi-Fi?
Yeah.
I've not heard that term before, but I love it. It took me a second.
Wi-Fi.
Wi-Fi.
So
I was wondering if she worked. Okay.
Yeah, so she does work, and I am going on her benefits. And right now, the plan is that she's going to probably continue to work for about 2 years, and then we're going to reassess things. She pre-pandemic had a career that she worked from home already, and it's really flexible in terms of her hours. And she works for a small company with people that she went to college with, and she really enjoys her job and likes the people that she works with. So she's not necessarily, chomping at the bit to quit like I was. So right now the plan is to go on her insurance and see what happens over the next 2 years. And then, once she retires, then we'll probably just buy a plan on the exchange.
Yeah, that's what we're planning on doing. Unless I can somehow get into this Wi-Fi program. I was thinking about starting a dating site while you were talking about that called Wi-Fi, where you look for a wife that can get you financial independence and insurance benefits.
Yeah, it's like getting a mail order bride to get citizenship. Like maybe there's some sort of reciprocal arrangement here. You can get to get benefits, true benefits, not just friends with benefits.
Okay, speaking of just your wife and going back to family a little bit, I'm curious how you two talk to your kids about finances, your lifestyle decisions, kind of this journey you're on. I can't remember the exact age of your kids, but just like, how do you have these conversations with them, and how much do you talk about it with them versus not?
So they're 8 and 10. And so they're young enough that, well, I'll put it, they're old enough that I think they get certain things and certain concepts. Actually, my son the other day asked me this question, which was just, I was like, damn, you're smart. He asked me, why do we have to pay taxes if the federal government can just print money? And I was just like, holy crap,
that's
kid.
A great question.
That there's like doctoral dissertations written
if only
on that
someone
topic.
could answer that.
Yeah. So I gave him my best shot at it. But we've been trying to teach the kids about money and the importance about saving your money, investing your money. I've set up a bank of mom and dad for the kids to kind of invest their money and deposit it, and any money that they receive, we let them spend some, but they need to save some as well, and give some as well. So we're trying to instill those values in them. One of the things that I've talked about on Twitter a bit is we've set them up both with Roth IRAs, and they've actually earned legitimate income. And, we've got a local hospital here that does medical tests, various devices that they want to test on, adults and on kids, and they'll pay you for your time. And so we signed the kids up. So they've already got $700 each in their Roth IRAs because they've, spent a little time. And, so things like that we've set up for them. But, ultimately at the end of the day, like when I talk to them about money, they see us driving, 2006 and 2012 model cars when a lot of their friends have brand new Teslas and things like that. And, we just tell them that, one of the reasons why dad's able to retire and not go into the office every single day anymore is because we've made smart financial decisions and we're not spending all of our money on things. And, I think that, you can demonstrate to the kids, how you model your own behavior, and that hopefully that starts to make an impression. But, we haven't been too kind of gung ho on, we got to beat this through their skulls. We just try to model it by our own behavior.
Yeah. My kids are of similar age to yours, 10 to 13. Mike's are a little bit younger. But I do notice, they don't, similar to you, they see our choices and they frequently reference someone else's fancy car or big house. We without saying anything bad about those other people, we just talk about how, look, we're all making choices with our money. And just because you see something doesn't mean somebody has more money. It's just how they choose to spend it. But I will say, one of the things I notice just about their responses, they don't always like it. Like, when we say no to certain things and we kind of explain our intentionality and why, but they do get it. Like, I can tell that it's like stinking in and that they're processing it. And I even see themselves like stop each other and somebody will ask for something and they're like, well, we're not going to do that because of, this or this, or like they're slowly learning and picking up on and kind of accepting our values, if you will.
So one of the things that I did this past year, so, maybe your kids are a little too old for this, but, our kids are in that peak age of where Roblox is like, crack cocaine for, kids between the age of 7 and 10. And so they went into it. They went public this past year. And so we bought stock in Roblox, and, we would just kind of go each day at the dinner table. Hey, Dad, how's Roblox stock doing? And for about 9 months last year, I was just like, wow, like we are up. Like we bought $10,000 worth of Roblox stock. And at one point we were at like $21,000, and they're like, holy crap, like this is amazing. And now with all the growth stocks just getting absolutely hammered, it's below the IPO price. And now we've lost money on the deal, but they're a little less enamored with knowing how Roblox stock is doing. So, for a while they thought that, maybe by buying stock and investing, it only goes up, but it doesn't. Yeah. Kids, sometimes things come back down.
Yes. We just, by the way, when you said you put a little in and then you said 10,000, I was like, wow, that's an aggressive, I don't mean that in a bad way, but I was just like, that's a nice amount of money in there.
I wanted to have some real skin in the game on this one.
Yeah, no, I like it. I would have honestly, the way my kids are still obsessed with Roblox and a few things, I would still bet that that's going to, turn around. We just did Splitwise. I don't know if you've heard of it.
No.
It lets you buy fractional shares of things. And so I actually just set it up like a couple weeks ago and put $100 in each of the kids' account. And we keep getting busy and forgetting to like teach them how to do it. But basically they can buy a fractional share of Roblox or Disney or Apple or whatever they want. And they can manage it in their app. So I'm like a custodian and they have their own app login and they can set buy and trade. And I'm interested to test it out just to teach them, kind of the spirit of what you're trying to get your kids to understand.
It's great.
Maggie, I think you need to up those amounts if you want to teach them a lesson.
I know. I need to teach them a $10,000 lesson, not
exactly.
a $100 lesson. Yeah, I like it.
All right, so let's wrap this up, and I'd like to issue you a little challenge here. You have throughout the show touched on a lot of very important life lessons that you have learned over the years, both about yourself and about time with family. Would you be able to summarize for us and articulate as best you can the biggest life lessons you've learned on this journey and provide your advice to others who are thinking about a similar path?
That's a big one.
Yep.
No.
I like that. That's like a lawyer's answer, by the way. A trial lawyer's answer. No.
It's funny. So one of the things that you learn in law school and then as a trial lawyer is, how to ask questions and how to answer questions, right? And you always teach your witnesses, how to answer the questions that are asked, right? So, do you know what time it is?
Yes.
No.
Okay, there you go, right? In front of me. It's a yes or no question, but a lot of people say, yeah, sure, it's 5:30. It's, so you got to answer the question that's asked. Yeah. So in terms of life lessons, I think that there are financial life lessons and there are then actual, life lessons, on the financial things. I mean, obviously, if you spend less than you earn, you will do fine. And, ultimately getting started as early as possible, allowing time to work its magic, allow the compound interest to work its magic, you will be fine. I think it's really important for people to develop, habits that can, help them along the way. And I think, tracking your net worth regularly, tracking your spending regularly really helps because, what gets measured does get managed. So I think that everybody should be doing that. If you want to make some big steps, I think just the idea of like looking at what your finances are doing on a regular basis, and whether that's monthly or quarterly or just yearly, you'll benefit a lot from that. And then, automating things as much as possible, doing your regular 401k deductions and, IRA savings and, regular savings, all of that will help you achieve financial independence, provided that you are, making some sort of, delta between what you're earning and what you're spending. But, on the kind of the bigger question of life lessons along the way, there are in my several decades of life on this planet, since I came out of the ocean, there are a lot of things that I've learned along the way. I think the spouse that you marry is incredibly important, and I don't think that I would have been able to do half of what I've been able to do. Were not for the fact that my spouse is incredible. She's incredibly smart. She's incredibly gifted. She's incredibly talented and loving, and she's a great mother, and she's also then good with money as well. So we're really lucky in that regard. And then ultimately, for me, the thing that's the most important thing of all is time with family. And life passes you by really quickly, and if you don't take the time to really appreciate it, you're going to miss it and you're going to regret it. So do what you need to do to not make those mistakes and not regret it. Like, spend the time with your kids while they're young, because they're not going to be young for very long. Yeah. And spend the time with your spouse don't take him or her for granted, because, you never know what's going to happen. It's really important. And it's those relationships that make life worthwhile.
Great advice.
I think that's great advice. And Landshark, you gushing about your wife reminded me about your in-laws post, where you also were like, you were very complimentary of her, which I just think is a great quality in a partner. So good for you for being so just positive and kind and nice and loving towards your wife.
She's an awesome woman, and she's from an awesome family. So I'm very lucky.
Yeah. Well, it's good that you can put it into words as part of what I was trying to say, because I think people don't express that enough. Okay. We are going to do a really quick speed round and then wrap things up. So we're going to ask you a couple of really quick questions, like quick answers, sort of like your no answer. So you can just say no if you don't want to answer any of these. I'm half joking. Okay. What's the last material, object, or personal luxury item that you spent $100 or more on?
A Kindle.
Okay. Nice. What is one good habit that you're trying to form, or a bad habit that you're trying to break right now?
I'm trying to not be a complete drunk so much. I'm trying to get a handle on my excessive drinking.
Okay. Well, for what it's worth, we've been on the phone for about an hour and I haven't seen you drink anything. So you're doing great.
I'm good today.
Okay. What is one of your favorite financial tools or apps that you use?
I like Mint and Personal Capital a lot. I think those aggregator services are awesome.
Cool. Okay, last one. And you've actually given us a lot of this throughout the episode, so no pressure if it's too much. But if we gave you a billboard, we paid for a billboard in, downtown Colorado. That's a state, sorry, but downtown Boulder, wherever. What message would you put on that billboard to share with the world?
Be good to one another.
That's a good one.
I like it. Well, Landshark, it was a pleasure having you on the show, and it was great to hear your story and get your thoughts and advice. So thank you again.
I appreciate you guys taking the time. You guys are doing a great job. I'm really enjoying listening to your show. So I wish you continued success, and congratulations, Maggie, with your upcoming retirement. It's going to be great. I can't wait to hear more about it.
Thank you so much. I can't wait to actually get into it. So I'm looking forward to it. It's a fun journey, even on the last couple months riding into it.
Well, we'll have to talk more about it.
I'm sure you're feeling the same in the phase you're at in your journey.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
All right.
Thank you.
Thanks, Landshark.
Okay. Bye, Landshark. Right. Bye, Mike.
Bye.
Take care.
Thanks, everybody, for listening. If you've been challenged or inspired by what you've heard today, please rate and review the show. You can also subscribe to make sure you never miss an episode.
If you have thoughts or questions, we would love to hear from you, and you can leave us a voicemail or text us at 404-981-3370, or you can hit us up on Instagram or Facebook.